with the next breakout session here, and we're going to talk about the employer-driven big build solutions. And so we've got with us today 3 of our employers here up front, and I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves and give who they are with today. I'll let you start, Ken.
Thanks. I'm Kent Mattson. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Lake Region Healthcare. Lake Region Healthcare, just kind of give you an idea of where we're at. We've got a service territory that brings us just a little bit north of Detroit Lakes, a little bit south of Morris, a little bit east of Alexandria, and a little bit west of Wahpeton Breckenridge. We've got 2 hospitals between our 2 organizations, about 11 clinics. We've got roughly 1,200 employees and roughly about 120 medical providers. And our payroll for most of our staff is about $90 million, and we make another investment in provider sides of things about $30 million. So we are, I think, kind of the largest employer in Otter County, and then we also draw employees from 4 other counties. And as I looked at kind of the map of where everybody comes from around here, we've got at least one person that lives in every one of the communities in Otter County. So we are very interested in housing solutions, making sure we've got workforce available. And we recently updated our mission to be partnering to enrich life through health. So we're happy to be partners in anybody that wants to help provide a solution for housing. And thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Hi everyone, I'm Carly Carlson. I'm the Human Resources Manager at the Brunswick, New York Mills, probably better known as Lund and Kressliner facility. So we have about 625 employees and growing like everybody. We have about 100 future opportunities, and we'll talk about some of that as well. Our team as well comes from many different counties. In average, travel about 65 miles. And all of what we talked about so far this morning continues to be one of our biggest challenges. So thanks for having me.
And I'm Rob Moser. I work at KLN Family Brands in Perham. We have 2 major companies in Perham with KLN Family Brands. One is Tuffy's Pet Foods, and the other is Kenny's Candy. And together, those 2 companies employ a little over 750 people. We also have another factory, Tuffy's Pet Treats, down in Delano, Minnesota. So as everyone's saying, we have a lot of people that travel, but we also have a lot of barriers to growth because we can't get enough labor. So yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you guys for being willing to share some of your stories and stuff this morning. So just to start with, and maybe I'll start with Rob and Kent as being 2 of the largest employers and probably are the largest employers in the county. Why do you feel it's important for employers to be in the conversation about housing?
Well, I mean, sometimes it's as simple as saying if we don't have housing, we don't have workers. So, you know, part of it, I think, is just self-evident. Our world's a little bit different, though, too. You know, part of our main business is making sure that we've got healthy communities, and affordable, accessible housing is very important to have. So it fits into us, our mission as an employer. It also fits in our mission as what we do day to day to help communities stay healthy. So that's why we're in the game.
And I would echo a lot what Kent said. I think we have to be involved out of necessity. One of our biggest things is our area for growth is for labor, and housing is definitely the biggest barrier there. So I think often as employers, we work as a conduit of information. So we get to hear probably faster than what a lot of the government organizations do about what some of our needs are and where some of the roadblocks are, and what problems they're having, real personal problems that they're having. And the other side of that is we become probably a good way of voicing information to our people. We get information brought to us or problems brought to us on a daily basis. So I think we have to be, out of necessity, we have to be involved, but out of the knowledge base, we have to be that middle person if we expect to really grow as a company and as an area.
Thank you. And Carly, as we were kind of lining this up and talking through it again, you had a few stories that really illustrate the need for housing for employees. And can you share maybe a couple of those with us this morning?
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably, my examples are probably very familiar to some of you, but I just shared with the group earlier this week that we had a leader join our team. He actually just started with us this week, and he actually accepted his offer months ago and continually wanted to push out his start date because he couldn't find a place to live. And that was inevitable, and I had to just explain to him that unfortunately it's probably not going to get easier. And so that's just one example. Regardless of the level of the individual, it's difficult. And I absolutely agree with you, Rob, where, in the business field, we hear these examples. We try to help our employees. They come to us oftentimes thinking that maybe we know that rental property or we know that housing solution for them. And it's trying to help them, but this information is helpful for us to go back. But it's hard to, really tell and recruit and retain those employees when they want to come, but they're looking at uprooting a family and not having a spot for them. Oftentimes that they're faced with that tough decision. And then another thing that we were talking about earlier this week, I'm sure lots of you hopefully have heard, but we announced just a few weeks ago that we're expanding our facility, but we're expanding it outside of Ottertail County. We're expanding it to the Wilmer location, and one of our main reasons we're doing that is because the ability to attract the employees, and it goes back to housing. So we don't want to do that. We're still going to keep all of our 625 plus employees on our site, but now we're branching out and putting that on our local team to now expand into Wilmer because there was availability there. So again, we all want to keep it in our county, but it's just very apparent that it's important.
Thank you for that. And I'll add one too, as we talk on the board, and I'm going to put some words in Dave Shornack's mouth for him, but Arvik is in a very similar situation as well, where they continue to want to expand inside of Ottertail County, and it's very hard to be able to attract people due to the housing needs. And so I think it is a very common message for a lot of businesses that want to continue to grow here. We have to have that housing so we can attract that workforce and be able to give them the great jobs and the great life that we have here in Ottertail County. So,
I think, Jeff,
yeah,
maybe
go
one
ahead.
point I'd say on that tactic is I believe strongly in Ottertail County. I'm just a proponent of rural areas, really believe that our county needs to grow and thrive. But from a business perspective, we've had to make some choices where we're having housing challenges, and we've got a lot of people that can work remote. And so we've started some new positions that live in other communities but work remote. And I don't like that because I want our people to, live where they work, but we had no choice really. And so I think remote work is a threat to rural areas, and we just want to make sure that we don't kind of feed into that.
Good point, Ken. So as businesses here in our community, and as we know housing is very important, do you guys offer, and I'll kind of allow you each to talk, but any supports or incentives that you would offer today or maybe are considering offering, or any other involvement that you have with your employees and the housing needs?
We are always looking at different things we can do. We actively have a strong relationship with the New York Mill City, talking about all the different partnerships we can do. But we provide temporary housing, we provide relocation for any level of an employee, and we really just ask the question about what we can do to help them make the transition. Again, my example earlier about this individual, he is now looking at a place to put his camper, and we're talking about that and trying to see where we could help as well. So when you talk about the cost from an employer standpoint and what it takes to recruit and retain, it's the continued too, because now we're looking at that investment opportunity and how we can, have that employee start with us, but now we're looking at potentially paying for some of their housing for significant amount of time as well.
Okay. I'd add on to what Carly's saying. The first step, I think, is our communication. And just like Carly is saying, we're looking at, okay, how do we help be the bridge between where they're at now, where they're going to be in a month or maybe even a week. Hopefully, the RV thing, we're seeing that now too, about We're seeing more people who are mobile and they're saying, can I find a spot just for my RV? We've dabbled into buying homes and renting them out to our people, but that becomes a little slippery too, right? When you're a manufacturer and now you're still doing a home rental, it kind of gets you out of your comfort zone. We have also bought modular units, more when we were working more with the H2B program where we would bring people in that way, but we've kind of went away from that. But the other thing that we do is we do have a home loan program where if an employee comes to us, they've been with us for 3 years, we'll give them $10,000 for a down payment. Now, there are some stipulations about sticking with us and being in a certain area, but we've even opened it up now to say, it used to be a first-time home buyer, but now a second time or a third time, just to kind of get more homes on the market for other people if people want to upgrade. So we've had that program in place for 10 years. I wouldn't say we get inundated with requests, but we have at least 5 people a year that do use that program. So I think it's something, though, that we're going to have to expand or at least make it easier for people to get into earlier if we want to be successful moving forward.
We did some years ago try a first-time homebuyers program where it was a loan, and people at our organization really didn't take advantage of that, so it really got sunsetted. I'm not sure, why it didn't take up, but right now, historically, we've had some challenges with people just needing a short-term rental to get to a long-term housing, and as others have shared, that's going to be longer and longer. So some of the things that we did, we've made arrangements to have standing leases in some apartments in our community. We also have got some homes that we've acquired around our main campus in Fergus Falls over the years. And for the most part, we've just kind of sporadically used those. Sometimes they've been vacant, sometimes we've knocked them over. But right now, we are taking an inventory of what we have. We just picked up 3 more homes in around our neighborhood strategically. And we're going to put a plan together to renovate those, to use some of them for single family, but we've got one that can maybe be put into a 7-plex. So we're taking some of the capital that we would otherwise use to buy a new medical device or something like that and having to invest it into housing solutions so we can keep workforce here. That's not the business we want to be in, but it's the business that we have to be in. We're also doing some things with our senior housing facility. We've got a 64-unit assisted living facility that has had more vacancies than ever. And the reason there's vacancies is we can't find staff to fill it up. So we've used some of those units to put some of our transitional workers into that can live with the elder population. Again, we don't want to do that because that's not helping us keep our mission to serve elder care. But I think somewhere along the lines that, there's others in the room here that are in our business. We have got significant vacancies in our elder care units, assisted living and nursing homes that I think are causing some pressure on housing as well. And we've got to come up with a solution for that, because if we can get folks where they need to get for that care, they're going to get out of some of these environments that they're living in that maybe aren't safe for them, and will help the other inventory keep moving along. So that's probably created a backlog for some houses turning over. And it's a significant number. In our community, it's 100 people or so that probably aren't serving. Chuck Hofius is here from Perham Health. They're having the same challenges. So, some of this stuff is starting to logjam a little bit, and we have got to work together to have creative solutions for that as well.
I want to add one comment on to any of the employers that are looking at down payment assistance for a new home buyer or a second home buyer, that type of thing as well. You heard a little bit earlier today as well that the county has also offering that, and Amy had talked about how they could double that up with a city's down payment assistance. That also works with an employer down payment assistance. So if that's something that you're thinking about as an employer, as an opportunity, here's an opportunity to basically double or even more what you're offering in. The county's able to put some in there as well too. So it hopefully supercharges that a little bit to maybe get some people into some houses as well and get that demand out there and more houses built as well. So I want to talk, and Kent, you mentioned it in your mission or your new statement there as well, but can you talk a little bit more about when you talk about the connections between affordable, stable housing and how that helps with improved health?
I can. So when I asked some of our team members for information on this, they said, how long do you have to talk? And are you really going to talk to this, Kent? And do you need some help? So this is a topic that we work on, and again, Chuck and his team work on this. Housing is a social determinant of health that affects our community's health and wellness. There is a ton of data around this, and it's something that we work on every day because part of our goals are to keep people out of our emergency room because that's not where they can thrive. Keep people out of our hospitals because that's not where they can thrive either. And it's expensive for all of us. So when I talked to the folks about this, they gave me some talking points here. So rather than kind of speaking from up here that I know it really well, I'll kind of talk off my notes. But the social determinant of health are these non-medical factors that influence health outcomes and quality of life. And there's a lot of research around this. It's really deep. And again, any of our team would be happy to share this with anybody interested in it. But there's this critical link between stable, decent, affordable housing and positive health outcomes. And they show that the physical health is affected, the mental health is affected, and overall well-being is affected when housing becomes an issue. So there's a ton of studies out there that show the impact of financial strain. Also shows that people are committing resources to try to find housing. And sometimes when they're doing that, they're not paying attention to some of the other investments that they need to make in their personal well-being and health, such as healthy food choices, utilities, transportation. Also, the studies have shown that people that have a challenge paying their rent and mortgage are less likely to have medical care, and they're likely to postpone needed treatment. So they face kind of difficulty also in purchasing food. And so all of that starts to spiral as well. The affordable and stable housing also stresses these health outcomes amongst adults and children. There's a correlation between stable housing and people using primary care services and using emergency departments less. And that means decreased healthcare costs for our society as well as everybody as employers. So there's a direct correlation between housing and a lot of the healthcare services. There's studies all over that show that unstable housing puts disruption in employment, social networks, education. They rely on more social service benefits. And again, all of these things negatively impact health. Definitely there's some research that our team lifted up that the anxiety of a home foreclosure and some of the challenges that people have paying for a house that they can't afford causes hypertension, heart disease, anxiety, and depression. And then when you have people in that position, they rely on some unhealthy coping mechanisms that make all of it worse. So the team put a bunch of information out there to show just that's an evidence-based conclusion that housing is bad for the general health and population. But if you think about it too, from the employment side of it, if you have somebody that's routinely sick, they're not available to work. If you have somebody that's stressed out, even if they're at work, maybe they're not as productive because they're thinking about what's going on outside their work life. So we want everybody to be productive, we want everybody to be well, and we want everybody to be healthy. That's part of our core work that we do every day. And so, we are in the game of trying to deal with social determinants of health, which is related to housing. And then the other side of it, as an employer, we're trying to make sure housing is available so we have people to staff our facilities to provide health care for people. And then the other thing on the recruitment side of it, from the employer side, what we routinely hear from people that we hire is, how are the schools and what type of restaurants are around there? We hear from others, the questions are, how are the schools, how is healthcare, and how are the restaurants around there? And so a strong healthcare organization in your communities, whether it's Perm or Fergus Falls or Battle Lake, that helps you all recruit workforce. And so, again, it's which comes first, chicken, the egg, but I think at the end of the day, we're all mutually dependent on each other, and we all should partner up in new and innovative ways. So again, more information on the social determinants of health as it relates to housing, but that's just kind of an overall recap.
Thank you for that, Ken. I'm going to go off script a little bit, but ask Rob and Carly as well. And Kent mentioned it, and it may be whether data or if it's your gut feel, as you have employees that have stable housing compared to the ones that don't, do you see any correlation between the turnover rates in the non-stable housing to the ones that are in stable housing?
I was actually thinking about that, listening to you, and oftentimes, and I would imagine we might have similar stories, it takes one little incident that might be little in our minds, but such as losing housing or not finding housing, to just make somebody be so overwhelmed in the workforce that they feel their only option is to exit. And that is, I think, very true. And that then is their mental health, that's their well-being, that's everything. But we see that where they find that, something happened and they just feel like their only option is to leave their employer, ultimately then maybe leave their home, relocate. And so definitely, I think it affects the whole picture.
Yeah, and I would echo those same thoughts there. We see it quite often where someone's looking for housing, gets frustrated, and maybe, particular for our people, maybe living east of here, and they can't find a spot to go. Now gas starts to get to $4 a gallon, and the whole decision matrix starts to say, you know what, I'm going to skip out of here. I'm going to go a little bit further east where I can get a different job that's less travel, maybe not as much money, but yet it maybe makes more sense for me. So definitely we see turnover go up due to inability to secure housing from not only buying but from renting perspective. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. And I guess I'd then like to just kind of ask of each of you, and maybe Kent, I'll start with you, but so how does housing that matches the demands of your workforce, so that, of course, the different levels of housing, how does that fit into the bigger picture of your organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's complex for us in some respects because we've got the full spectrum of employees. We've got folks that are entry level at $17 an hour, and we've got folks that make, into seven figures. And so it's not just in some instances to recruit, affordable, accessible entry-level housing. It's opportunities for somebody to live a lifestyle that they want to live. And so an inventory of some higher-end homes in some neighborhoods or lakes or things like that. We've got to serve all of those different masters. And, it's not easy. I can tell you that every time we are trying to recruit a position in the community, that position is going to have at least 10 other offers that are just as solid as us on the financial side of it. And so what we're trying to do is sell community and experience. And so, we're not going to sell a Chicago experience, but we're going to sell, what's on that screen. But again, if we don't have kind of that broad spectrum of housing, we're going to be challenged. And the good thing is we've got a lot of really solid builders in the community in our area that really provide some attractive options. From our main hospital, you've got to be 30 minutes for most people that have to be on call. So, sometimes we push it a little bit, but yeah, so we need a diverse opportunity of housing solutions from entry level to high end.
I would agree, and I definitely think that's a very relevant example in healthcare. For us, we have all spectrums too, but entry level is definitely where we see our daily, conversations. Down to, an example is we're trying to grow the demand and the desire to get into the manufacturing workspace from college students, from high school students, and so we've been working really hard the last few years to grow an internship program. And I tell my team all the time, let's look at it as a program. And one thing we struggle with is housing, because these folks are potentially looking to come for 3 months. We have some that are longer, and so that's hard. And so it's that entry level, that rental property as well. And one example I forgot to share earlier is a few months ago we had two different employees who didn't know each other, but as they were talking to me just about their experiences, they were bidding against each other for a home. And that hurt me so much to hear that. And then once it connected, I was like, oh, I feel so bad. And they had no idea. And I'm sure that's happened to many people, probably even in this room. So it's definitely in line.
Yeah, for us as well, our biggest roadblock to growth right now is labor, and if we can't find spots for them to go, we have kind of this perfect storm of messiness for us, right? We have a demographic that's getting older that will be retiring if they haven't already retired. We don't have a lot of rentals there, and the new homes that are being constructed, they're often priced out at a spot because of home construction costs. They're priced out at a spot that's just not attainable. So there's really not a lot of spots for these people to go to find housing. So we put our hands up in the air a lot, and I think we lose so many of those. And so unfortunately, you have this problem at work of sales is saying we got a lot, and ops is saying we can't do that. We just don't have enough people. So this is really critical for our sustainability, and it's certainly for our growth too.
Yeah, that's a good point on the intern and the program experience. We've got an educational clinical experience for nurses, medical techs, and pharmacy students, and that's been a pipeline to recruitment, and there is a real challenge for those folks to find housing. They're a little bit more amenable to living together in a congregate living space, but that's where we're putting some of those folks into some of these housing developments that we're working on. But again, the larger communities don't necessarily have the challenges that we have, or maybe to this degree, on housing. And so that's really causing some folks to stay in a Fargo or a Minneapolis or a St. Cloud, and it's hurting us.
Thank you, guys. And you're hearing, and I think you've seen before too, I think we have over still 1,000 jobs available in Otter Tail County. We have 1,000 lakes, we have 1,000 jobs. And that's really mostly from the manufacturers, the healthcare, the companies that are located here that want to continue to grow. But we're also in an environment where people want to live, and Kent mentioned earlier about the remote work that's coming up. And we have a great opportunity to attract people here that are working in a cities-based organization. But again, without housing, we can't get anyone to even come here and live and be in a live where you want to play type environment. So the housing needs are even more critical than the 1,000 jobs that we have currently open today with our manufacturers and our businesses and organizations that are looking for people. This is larger even yet, where we want to attract more people to, again, reduce our tax base, make sure more people are here. It really helps the community grow overall. So housing is, whether it's the chicken or the egg, it's a definite need that we need here in our community. So all of us as employers, as individuals, as developers, if there's opportunities for us to really look at how do we continue to get people in that stable housing. I think we've got a little time here for some questions from the audience. So I'm going to open it up and see if anyone has any questions for our panel here this morning.
So I don't necessarily have a question. I'm trying to wrap my head around how we can help communities and employers. You had touched upon the fact that you're having to go to a different community and you are taking dollars to invest in a business. Obviously, that's a good thing. And that revenue stream that you have, maybe thinking of different ways, I come from a city where we own all 4 utilities. So for us to get utilities and that infrastructure into a residential development, and then obviously for the developers to have their costs, or whoever that cost is burdened to, maybe thinking outside the box and using that money to invest in your community into those residential areas. The private sector is a little more open to the government sector on what you can do with your funds, but maybe reinvesting into the community for development.
I think I can maybe speak to that. I mentioned before that we're in the business of making sure people have access to housing because it's that social determinant of health, and we have a lot of infrastructure that can support housing because we're in that business. We also take care of a lot of facilities and grounds. So we have back office functions that can send out rent bills and collect rent. We've got maintenance crews that can take care of facilities. We've got folks that already serve residential customers, and if we found a partner who is in the development and construction business that we're not in and have no interest in being in to kind of match up our resources with their resources, And that's where I think we could partner in some ways to create new using what we have. I think we contribute to tax base as well. Our hospital doesn't pay taxes, but our clinics definitely do. And so that's one of the ways we can give back to the community. But I think we just have to be intentional with our investment where we put our capital, and kind of putting together some affordable housing programs in our communities is something we're interested in, that we're trying to figure out who could be a strategic partner. So happy to talk to anybody who would fill that space.
And I just chime in, we're a family-owned company, so we do have a little bit more freedom that way, and the Nelson family has been super aggressive in the communities about trying to create opportunities, and they have done lots of investment in apartment buildings and actually buying homes, and I know the Nelson family is still doing some stuff right now. It just isn't enough, I think, for what the demand is out there right now, so whatever gets built gets swallowed up so fast that it doesn't seem like it's helping. It is, but it doesn't seem like it's helping enough.
Well, I guess just to capitalize on that is, like, I guess I'm looking at the fact that a lot of times employers or places want to use their investment to create a new investment for additional return. And obviously anybody wants that. But what I'm saying is talking to your local city or county for those development costs, specifically just like even grant funding or donations to those local organizations to help with those costs. It's great to build these buildings and get a return on those for rental units or what have you, but actually giving to the city to help with those utility costs or infrastructure costs. Does that make sense? So, thanks.
Yeah, it really makes sense. Our organization is a nonprofit corporation. We're owned by the community. We're not owned by any large system. We're not owned by any individuals. And so any investment that or return that we make on our operations goes back into our people and our places and our things. And for those of you who are in private business, our margin is 2%. We need to make 2% to be sustainable. And for folks that operate a for-profit business, you'd be thinking, how in the world can you sustain that? Why don't you shut that down, repurpose your capital, and let's make some money? That's not what we're about. We provide a safety net service, whether it's housing or healthcare, and we operate on that very thin margin. So when we think about where we want to aim our capital, it's to put a new linear accelerator in to treat radiation oncology patients, which we're putting in right now, a new PET CT to diagnose people that are sick and to help plan for radiation oncology treatment. So that's about a $7 to $9 million investment. We're rolling out another electronic medical record investment, which is about $25 million over 5 years. So our business is very expensive to operate, and that's why when we have capital, we want to put it into our core business, and we support our local communities, but we have to be careful about how much we put into others' infrastructure versus our infrastructure, because again, it's that safety net service like a utility. But now with this challenge that we're all facing, I think that's where we've got to figure out how to partner together to really build and grow, because we're facing some forces and headwinds that none of us have faced ever before. I mean, our turnover rate is 15% higher year to date than it's ever been. Some of that's going to stabilize, but that's really unprecedented. We've had more open positions, 3 times the open positions that we typically have had for 5 times as long than we've ever had. So that's our reality. We'll figure our way out of it. Partner with the local communities. We're very much into that.
And I agree. I think the community support, and I don't know that any members of the New York Mills City, I think they went to the other meeting, but that is so very important. An example of that would be we, for years, talked to our employees and then talked to our community about a daycare. But we raised our hand very aggressively and said, that's not the business we want to run, but how can we support it? And so that's an example of what we do. We're supporting the daycare that's in the city of Mills, financially and resources, but not running it. And so it's those things around the housing and what else we can do, because both parties are definitely needed to make it. It's not easy for either. It's not easy for the city. It's not easy for the employer either.
I've got the mic, so I'm going to just make some comments. I think we've gotten a lot of information from our panelists today, and there's just so many reoccurring ideas that keep coming back. And we're talking about workforce, I think, right in this session here. And as needy as the housing issue is the issue of building houses. We have a tremendous appetite for tradesmen, plumbers, carpenters, heating and air conditioning people, concrete people, all the trades that go into that. And we have just a significant lack of talented people in that area. So I think it also behooves us to try and cultivate that aspect of it, because if you wanted to build a new home today, and we've seen the programs this morning, and you want to build a new home and you feel that this is probably a time that you can do it, or you can't do it this year. And so as we talk about all this, we also have to bring up the wherewith that can get us to that point. And so I just encourage our young people to find good livings in these type of creative ways. We don't probably need all the professional people that we have been sending to our four-year colleges and onto doctorate degrees for various things, but we also need people that'll really come and fix our leaky faucet. And we have all those issues. Then there's one other thing that I think it comes up, and that is we're trying to make it so our elderly people can stay in their homes. And I think we've heard this morning even that not always is that the best place for them. And maybe they need to make that transition in life, as difficult as it is for them. But if the bathroom's upstairs and the bedroom's downstairs, or the vice versa, that is just not a good place for our elderly families or parents, or whatever that case may be. So we need to move that on. But sometimes that's difficult for them to sell those places. Now, if they've lived in them for 2 years or so, they can sell them without capital gains. But to generate other monies, there's situations where if they do make a sale of a property they have, is subject to capital gains and so forth. And I think as a community, we need to take a look at how we could create what sometimes is used as an acronym, a REID, where they can reinvest that dollars and get not have to pay those taxes that could be otherwise used in our communities to create new opportunities for housing, new opportunities for workforce, new ideas that come along with that. So I think we haven't got everything put together here yet, but we got more things and more opportunities that we can look at. And I think that's just some comments I had.
I guess now I want to first off just kind of close out again with a call to action to a few of our people in the room. But first off, for the people that are here from the cities, please start the conversation with your employers. As we were mentioning, how can we work together? Where are those opportunities? Where are those barriers? And how do we make sure that we can get the infrastructure going through? What other barriers are out there to being able to build those? I think you've heard from these employers, they're very willing to work with the communities, very willing to make sure that we can move housing forward. So please, as cities, be willing to reach out to your employers that are in your communities and start those conversations. And then also from the other employers that are in the room as well too. Something as easy as a survey, and one of you mentioned it, with your employees, to find out what are the housing needs for your employees, what are they looking for, so that as you meet with your communities, you have that information and you can really understand how do we take that next step. And so again, as a call to action, please don't walk out of here and just learn some good information. Let's work together as we walk out of this room today and really start driving this forward as well. Second off, I do want to thank all of our panelists, so if we can give them a round of applause for coming up here.
Just to add, we are missing a panelist today. He was actually unfortunately not able to join us, but was coming from Greater Minnesota Housing Fund, which is a nonprofit out of the cities that does a lot of work with employers, does a lot of work with financing programs. And one of the things that he was actually going to bring up is they have a employer-assisted housing guide. So examples from across the state of how employers are being involved in housing. You heard everything from, down payment assistance to what kind of capital can we put in. So, a spectrum of those examples are available in this resource. Also, as Jeff mentioned, a housing survey. So we actually have kind of just simple questions put together as a draft to just get you start thinking, and that's actually available on the resource table in the back. So if you want something just as a starting point, employers, that is available in the back. And then, like I said, this is available on Greater Minnesota Housing Fund's website if you want to download and look at that. So just 2 added resources for you.
One more, you bet.
I just want to talk about one thing that I didn't have when we moved here 30 years ago and started a business. And comparing to what we had versus what my children have that are in the ages from 20 to 30 years old. And they're all, starting their new jobs. And those businesses, and they're small, have a financial advisor within their company, or they contract out with somebody. And it helps them sit down with their college loans and their rent and their expenses, and they figure out what they need to do and how soon before they can start figuring out what kind of housing they can have permanently and what they can do. And, different conversations that I've had just in the different committees that I've been on, from, Habitat for Humanity. We've talked about that in some where everybody wants them to get into that new house, yet they don't have the financial understanding of what it takes to own that house. And unfortunately, some of those individuals end up losing their house, and you're going back a step. But that's something that, I feel is a piece that, and maybe you all have done that with your businesses, but to invest in the employees themselves that you have, and to help them figure out where they need to be and what it's going to take. And if the gas prices are high, okay, gas prices went up. Now let's go back and let's figure out what it's going to take and where you need to cut a little bit, and we can make this work so we don't have to lose you, but we're here to help you. And, when my son got married, or when he got engaged, I should say, we gave him a Dave Ramsey because we wanted them to understand what it was going to take. And it was the best thing we ever did for them. So just saying that doesn't have to be, Dave Ramsey, but it could be something within your own businesses, your companies, your communities that actually offer that you can partner that with some, with some of the businesses as well.
Thank you, Betty. Thanks again to the panel. I think we're out of time here, so I'm going to turn it back over to Nick. And thank you again for everyone participating.
Thanks again.